Hello everyone, welcome to our YouTube channel Exploring English Literature. Today we are going to discuss about literary forms. Literary forms क्या होते हैं इसके बारे में आज हम डिस्कस करने वाले हैं. Literature is the art of using words to express ideas, emotions and stories. लिटरेचर एक ऐसा आर्ट है जिसमें हम लोग अपने आइडियाज़, इमोशन और स्टोरीज को एक्सप्रेस करते हैं वर्ड्स का इस्तेमाल करके. जस्ट लाइक म्यूजिक हैज़ डिफरेंट स्टाइल्स लाइक क्लासिकल, जैज, रॉक, literature also has a different forms. A literary form means the shape or structure in which a writer presents his or her thoughts. It is the way a piece of writing is organized so that it can be communicated effectively. A literary form is simply the style or category a piece of writing belongs to. It's the way a writer chooses to organize their work. अगर आसान भाषा में समझा जाए तो literary form is the structure of piece of writing. Literary form are fundamentally categorized in four main genres. First is poetry, second is drama, third is fiction, and fourth is non-fiction. In this video, we will discuss about poetry. So what is poetry? Poetry is the earliest form to have evolved. People started expressing their thoughts and feelings in poems long before other forms existed. Poetry existed in oral form long before the invention of writing. The ancient poem Epic of Gilgamesh is the one of the earliest poem in existence. So how can we define poetry? Poetry is a form of literature that uses creative and expressive language to convey emotions, ideas और stories. पोइट्री एक ऐसा फॉर्म है जो यूज़ करता है क्रिएटिव और एक्सप्रेसिव लैंग्वेज टू कन्वे इमोशन, आइडियाज एंड स्टोरीज. इट ऑफन यूजेस रिदम, राइम एंड विविड लैंग्वेज टू क्रिएट स्ट्रॉन्ग फीलिंग और इमेजेस in reader's mind. A prominent English romantic poet, William Wordsworth, defined poetry as a spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. It takes origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. Poetry can be classified under two broad headings. पोइट्री को हम लोग दो हिस्सों में डिवाइड कर सकते हैं. एक है ऑब्जेक्टिव पोइट्री और दूसरा है सब्जेक्टिव पोइट्री. अब क्या है ऑब्जेक्टिव पोइट्री और सब्जेक्टिव पोइट्री? ऑब्जेक्टिव पोइट्री मीन्स it focuses on external reality rather than the poet's personal emotions. ऑब्जेक्टिव पोइट्री एक्सटर्नल रियलिटी पे ज़्यादा फोकस करती है, न कि पर्सनल इमोशंस पे. मेनली फोकस ऑन एक्सटर्नल वर्ल्ड एंड एक्सटर्नल सीन्स. ऑन द अदर हैंड, सब्जेक्टिव पोइट्री इज a reflection of poet's own personal feelings and experience. It is a window into poet's mind. We can understand poet's thoughts by looking at a poem. It reveals poet's inner thought and feeling. Objective poetry is older than subjective poetry. It is believed to have originated among the primitive people of prehistoric times when mankind had not yet learned to read and write. Subjective poetry came into existence when people began to give importance to their thought. Subjective and objective poetry can be further understood through their different types. Objective poetry has 5 types: ballad, epic, metrical romance, dramatic monologue, and limerick, where subjective poetry has 6 types: lyric, ode, elegy, idyll, sonnet, and epistle. Each type shows a particular way in which poet either express personal emotions or present external events and stories. First, we will discuss about objective poetry. First type in objective poetry is ballad. A ballad can be defined as a song that narrates story. The word ballad is derived from the Latin word ballare, which means to dance. Ballads were often performed with a simple instrument such as harp or fiddle. This makes ballad easy to remember and enjoyable to listen to. A ballad often narrates stories of love, adventure, war, and bravery. A ballad usually deals with single episode. The language used in a ballad is very simple. A ballad often begins abruptly, starting in the middle of action without long introduction. Ballad has a refrain. It is the characteristic of a ballad. Refrain ये एक ballad की characteristics है. अब refrain होता क्या है? Refrain means it is a group of lines repeated at a regular intervals throughout poems or song. ये कुछ lines होती है और group of word होते हैं जो repeat होते हैं regular interval में. जैसे कि for example, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by St. Coleridge. In this stanza, we can see water, water everywhere acts as a refrain. So, ballad is commonly categorized into 4 types based on origin and subject matter. बैलड का जो ओरिजिन है और उसका सब्जेक्ट मैटर है, इसको देखते हुए उसके 4 टाइप्स हैं. पहला है ट्रेडिशनल बैलड, सेकंड इज ब्रॉड साइड बैलड, थर्ड इज लिटरेरी बैलड एंड फोर्थ इज मॉक बैलड. फर्स्ट, ट्रेडिशनल बैलड, also known as a folk ballad, and it belongs to oral tradition. This ballad transmitted by singing and passed on from generation to generation. क्योंकि ये बैलड ओरल ट्रेडिशन से बिलोंग करता है और इट ट्रांसमिटेड बाय सिंगिंग एंड पास्ड ऑन फ्रॉम जनरेशन टू जनरेशन, इसकी जो ऑथरशिप है वो अननोन है. नेक्स्ट इज broadside ballad. It was usually printed on single sheet of paper. ये broadside ballad जो होते हैं वो एक single sheet of paper पे उसको लिखा जाता था. And these ballads were not expensive books. Street vendor sold them in a busy market and public places. This ballad was very popular among common people who couldn't afford costly books. When newspapers began to provide regular printed information, stories, and songs, the popularity of broadside ballad declined. जैसे जैसे न्यूज़पेपर की ग्रोथ होती गई, broadside ballad slowly decline होता गया. So next we have is literary ballad. Literary ballads are narrative poems written by poets. ये एक narrative poems होती है जो एक poet के द्वारा लिखी जाती है. A literary ballad is a story poem that imitates the old traditional folk song and stories that were sung and passed down through generations. These ballads were popular in late 18th century during Romantic period. The very famous example of this ballad is Literary Ballad, published in 1798, written by William Wordsworth and H.T. Coleridge. Next we have mock ballad. Mock ballad is a form that mocks the seriousness of literary ballad, and theme is comic rather than tragic. It has all features of literary ballad, but everything is given a humorous twist. इसका एक्सेलेंट एग्जाम्पल अगर हम देखें तो वो है द डाइवर्टिंग हिस्ट्री ऑफ जॉन गिलपिन, रिटन इन 1782 बाय विलियम कॉपर. It is the story of John Gilpin, a respectable citizen who loses control over his horse during journey. Instead of heroic adventure, the poem presents funny and embarrassing ride, which makes it mock ballad. Now the next type is epic. Epic is a long narrative poem about the heroic deeds of legendary and historical figures. It usually tells about wars, journeys, big events. The language of an epic is grand and serious. Epics are very important in nations' cultural history because they preserve the stories, beliefs, and values of people. An epic is a very long piece of work usually run in a books. The Ramayana and Mahabharata are best example of an epic. Centers around heroic figure. The hero is brave, strong, and represent ideal of society. Setting of an epic is very large. The story often moves across countries, kingdom. Epic usually include god, goddesses, demons, or magical events. The gods often help the hero. Epics are written in a grand, formal, and serious style. Next we have mock epic. Mock epic is a subtype of epic. Mock epic treats ordinary subject in a grand and serious style. साधारण घटना को बहुत ही गंभीरता से इसमें लिखा जाता है. It is a parody of a serious epic. Mock epic has all features of epic but treats subject in a humorous way. The purpose is to create humor and satire. Mock epic uses all the convention of classical epic, but intention is comic and satirical. The famous example of mock epic is Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock. Next is metrical romance. A metrical romance or chivalric romance is a type of a narrative poem which typically centers on courtly love, knights and chivalric deeds. अब ये chivalric deeds क्या होता है? Chivalric deeds मतलब brave and noble action done by a knight. Metrical romance generally centers around the knight. Tells stories often involving knights and heroes और typically इसकी ending happy होती है. Metrical romance is in simple language a romantic adventure story told in a poetic form. A classical example from 14th century is Sir Gawain and Green Knight. Next is dramatic monologue. In dramatic monologue, a simple person who is not poet narrates or shares his innermost feelings. But then, how it is an objective poetry? Because because in objective poetry, poet talks about external events, and here in dramatic monologue, poet narrates share his innermost feeling. So how dramatic monologue is objective poetry? Because here the poet does not speak directly in the poem. Instead, a poet creates a separate character who speaks. The feeling and thoughts we hear belongs to speaker in the poem, not to the poet. It uses a fictional speaker to reveal their internal thoughts, feeling and experiences. It uses fictional or assumed speaker to reveal their internal thoughts, feelings and experiences. It has all elements of drama, plot, character, dialogue, setting, yet it meant to be read, not performed on the stage. A single person utters whole poem. Setting, background are mentioned by the speaker. जो setting, background है वो speaker ही बताता है poem के अंदर. The best example of dramatic monologue is My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. Next type we have is a limerick. A limerick is a poem comprised of only 5 lines in a single stanza with a strict A, B, B, A rhyme scheme. Limericks often tell a short tale or description. They are often funny and sometimes have a twist at the end. Edward Lear's limerick is the best example of limerick, which consists of 5 lines with A, B, B, A rhyme scheme. Here, words beard, feared, hen, ran, and beard shows the A, B, B, A rhyme scheme. Now we have discussed 5 types of objective poetry. Now we will move to the subjective poetry. As we have seen earlier, subjective poetry is reflection of poet's personal feelings and experience. Subjective poetry has 6 types: lyric, ode, elegy, idyll, sonnet, epistle. First, we will discuss about lyric. Lyric is a short, non-narrative poem which is brief expression of mood or feeling. Non-narrative poem means it doesn't tell a story. It focuses on feelings and thoughts. Focus on personal emotion and subjective experience. The poem talks about poet's inner feelings. It shows poet's personal point of view. These poems were sung with a musical instrument called lyre. The name lyric comes from the lyre. Lyric has 3 parts. The poem lyric is divided in 3 parts, just like beginning, middle, and end. In the first part, poet tells what he is feeling. That is subject of the poem. Subject of the poem is introduced in the first part. Second part is the main body of the poem, where emotion is explained fully. Second part is heart of the poem. In third part, the poem comes to meaningful end and leaves impact on a reader. Let's take an example to understand this clearly. The Solitary Reaper by William Wordsworth. In the first part, poet introduces subject, a lone Highland girl reaping and singing. In second part, main body of the poem, Wordsworth compares her voice to nightingale and cuckoo bird. In third part, poet reaches to reasonable conclusion. The song has left permanent impression on his soul. Next type in subjective poetry is ode. Ode is a type of lyrical poetry characterized by their formal tone, elaborate structure, and focus on praising or celebrating particular subject. In this poem, poet addresses and praises someone or something with deep feelings. In simple language, ode can be defined as a poem of praise with strong emotion. आसान भाषा में ode is poem of praise. It is addressed directly to a person, object, or an abstract concept. Ode can also be written to commemorate an important public event like victory in a war, death of a person, or inauguration of some large institution. Ode can be further divided into three types. Ode को हम लोग तीन टाइप्स में डिवाइड कर सकते हैं. फर्स्ट इज डोरियन ओड, सेकेंड इज लेस्बियन ओड, थर्ड इज इर्रेगुलर ओड. तो हम इसमें देखते हैं पहला टाइप्स डोरियन ओड. Dorian ode is named after the district and dialect from which it originated. The structure of the poem based on movement of dancers. पोएम का जो स्ट्रक्चर है वो डांसर्स के मूवमेंट पर निर्भर करता है एंड इट हैज थ्री टाइप्स. फर्स्ट इज स्ट्रोफी, second is antistrophe, and third is epode. In strophe, the stanza establishes the theme and dancers move from right to left. In second part, antistrophe, stanza counterbalance theme where dancers took counter turn from left to right. And in epode, final part, stanza that concludes the ode, the dancer stand still. The ancient Greek poet Pindar, who wrote so brilliantly in this form that it is also known as Pindaric ode. Next type is lesbian ode, also known as Horatian ode. It is named after the island of Lesbos, from where it is originated. This form was popularized by two great Roman writers, Horace and Catullus. These odes are calmer and meditative in nature. Best example of lesbian ode is John Keats' Ode on Indolence and Alexander Pope's Ode on Solitude. Next type is irregular odes. An irregular ode is a poem that has the elements of an ode but does not strictly follow the Pindaric or Horatian form. ये ओड कोई भी एक फॉर्म को स्ट्रिक्टली फॉलो नहीं करता है. It is an ode characterized by irregularity of verse and structure. This type was introduced by Abraham Cowley. Each stanza has its own length and rhyme scheme. The best example of irregular ode is John Keats' Ode on Grecian Urn. Elegy. An elegy is a poem of lament written to mourn the death of an individual or to express grief at tragic event. Elegies are defined by their subject matter and don't have to follow any specific form. It means an elegy becomes an elegy because what it talks about, not how it is written. It means elegies are defined by their subject matter and not by their form. Because elegies focus on the emotional experience of poet, they are generally written in the first person. Typically, elegies end on hopeful note. Elegy is used for serious reflection on heavy topics. Pastoral elegy. It is a subtype of elegy. It is a form of elegy in which the mourner and one whose death is being mourned are represented as shepherds. Shepherd means चरवाहा, भेड़ों की देखभाल करने वाला, उसे इंग्लिश में shepherds कहते हैं. Pastoral means related to village life. Pastoral elegy generally sets in a rural world. Pastoral elegy originated in the work of Sicilian Greek poet Theocritus. In pastoral elegy, there is a use of natural imagery like shepherds, flocks, nature, trees. Greek gods and Roman gods often mentioned in the pastoral elegy. Next type is idyll. Idyll is a short poem or an episode in a larger poem which describes a beautiful rural scene or incident. It presents the ideal picture of nature. It is derived from the word Idyllon, meaning little picture. It has no fixed form. The idyll is a vivid visual description of an idealistic environment. Next type is sonnet. A sonnet is a poem of 14 iambic pentameter lines arranged in a specific rhyme scheme. It is usually written in iambic pentameter. Now, what is iambic pentameter? In sonnet, iamb is a unit consisting of two syllables, one unstressed followed by one stress. A syllable means a word which contains vowel sound a, e, I, o, u. So in simple language, iambic pentameter is consisting of two syllables, one unstressed followed by one stress, and 5 of these iambs in one line, that is iambic pentameter. Five of these iambs in a single line, that is iambic pentameter. The word sonnet derived from the Italian word sonetto, meaning little sound. Sonnet always has 14 lines. Sonnet is divided in two types, Petrarchan sonnet and English sonnet. So first we will look at Petrarchan sonnet, also known as Italian sonnet. It has two distinct parts, octave and sestet. First 8 lines raises the question, that is octave, and the last 6 lines serves an answer to it, that is sestet. Let's take an example and understand it. The Word is Too Much with Us by William Wordsworth. In the first 8 lines, Wordsworth argues that humanity has become obsessed with materialism. We have become disconnected from the nature. And in next 6 lines, Wordsworth offers solution to a problem. Francisco Petrarch wrote many sonnets in this form. He made this form very famous in Italian literature. Later, poets started calling this structure Petrarchan sonnet. English sonnet. This form was introduced by Sir Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey. This form was effectively used by Shakespeare that it is known today as Shakespearean sonnet. Let's take an example of William Shakespeare's Sonnet 18 to understand English sonnet. In English sonnet, the first 12 lines introduces the main idea or the problem, and the last 2 lines gives the conclusion. So this is the structure of English sonnet. Next and the last type is epistle. Epistle is a letter written in a verse that is addressed to a person. Epistles are serious and moral in tone. The writer shares ideas, advice, feelings, or teaching. Famous example of epistle is Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot by Alexander Pope.
That's it for today, guys. If you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe for more.